Hello, this is Gavin Palmer with Hero Looking for Group. I'm a miniature hero. I'm gonna have a asynchronous conversation with Lex Fridman. He doesn't know that I'm doing it, so this is a imaginary participatory correspondence. Let's go.
Did Stalin believe that communism is good, not just for him, but for the people of the Soviet Union and the people of the world?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Norm Macdonald and the song, when Sam Adams, not Sam Adams, what's his name? Let's look it up. The good versus the good. This is what I'm reminded of. Norm Macdonald quote. Norm Macdonald. Yeah, it's always the good versus the good. This is the Scott Adams, not Sam Adams. It's always the good versus the good. If I played it, would I get a violation? It's pretty good.
Akira. He's got clout.
Here we are. It's the beginning of another great day. A sunny summer day. It's the best day for you know what. I'm going to read you a quote from Norm Macdonald. And he says this: the idiot sees the world as good versus evil. The cynic sees the world as evil versus evil. The truth that no one seems to be able to see is that the world is, and always has been, a battle of good versus good.
There you go. So, there you go. That's your answer. Thanks for asking.
So, given the genocide in the 1930s that you described, was Stalin evil, delusional, or incompetent?
So, all humans are, in part, good and evil. That's why you can say it's always the good versus the good, but you can also say it's always the evil versus the evil. But people are delusional, and so people believe they are good, and then we're all incompetent. We're all, like, no one is perfect, right? So these are softballs, Lex. These are softballs.
If we look at this paranoid delusional system, Stalin was in power for 30 years. He is, many argue, one of the most powerful men in history. Did, in his case, absolute power corrupt him, or did it reveal the true nature of the man? And maybe just in your sense, as we kind of build around this genocide of the early 1930s, this paranoid delusional system, did it get built up over time? Was it always there?
So the human has that potential for good and evil. Like, we're born into this world ignorant. You know, we go through a stage in life where we're like these little gods that want everything when we're really young, and we can mature. And then the potential for sin, like the 7 deadly sins, is there all the time. And we can develop a skill and a discipline in being able to keep those sins from growing. And so a theme that I will hit on is that we should be attempting to become people who are doing that spiritual war and cultivating our minds such that we do not allow those sinful seeds to sprout and grow. By being able to learn how to identify them as they emerge and be very careful and gentle with them. And then we also learn how to do that with other people. And then we end up learning how to find the people who are most skilled at this. Because when you take the ones who aren't skilled at it and you give them power, all of a sudden the garden, that nasty garden, can really really spread and create a lot of suffering that's unnecessary if only we were, skilled at doing the spiritual war. That's a good question.
And I wonder, why is that there? Why does the human heart tend so easily towards this kind of hate?
So hate is just this, is one of the sins. It's wrath, and I think it's kind of rooted in fear, like perhaps. And for me, and maybe it's unique for different people, but for me, like, my big sin is pride. So it's my pride that ends up creating the wrath. It's that little miniature God that's in all of us, that when we're born, we maybe it's not in all of us, but it was in me, and it seems to be in almost everyone I see. And then we learn and mature and learn how to deal with this. But then we become defensive. We try to protect our beliefs and our views, and we are addicted to comfort. And so then when there is this discomfort, where our pride is being threatened, like our sense of who we are is being threatened, we have this opportunity through that discomfort to learn, or we can go into wrath. We can become very angry because either we are unwilling to change. Well, ultimately that's the reason. Now, we might have a good reason to be angry with others, but if we can ultimately come up with a creative, loving solution even when other people are wrong, and so we don't have to give in to the wrath, but it can be a motivation to end up being creative and innovative instead of falling victim to that wrath, which can be very irrational, short-sighted. And this is part of human nature. We have to be working on this spiritual war within ourselves.
Well, let me ask you about human nature here on both sides. So first, what have you learned about human nature from studying genocide? Why do humans commit genocide?
Why do humans commit genocide? I think, we don't like to sacrifice ourselves. We don't like to sacrifice our comforts. We don't like to sacrifice, and that's ultimately it. We don't want to step into that discomfort and sacrifice, our wealth, or, the heating and air, or the food in our stomach. And so we don't want to, there's a little bit of sloth involved. Like, we don't want to put in the work. We're a little bit lazy. And so, because, innovation and creation requires energy and work. And so that sloth can get us. And it's very easy to allow those sinful seeds to take root, because it's kind of our natural tendency that we were born with. You could see it in children as they grew up. There's something like maybe they say the terrible twos, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, or they can start to be violent because they haven't learned how to deal with that thing, our human nature. They haven't learned how to deal with it in a gentle way, and they have to learn how to do that. And they need an environment where people can teach them how to do that. And that's what we're dealing with. We haven't learned how to provide that environment where we can learn and teach the right way of being in handling our human nature.
But then if you go up the hierarchy, at the very top there's a dictator. Presumably, you go to like middle management to the bureaucracy. The higher you get up there, the more power you have to change the direction of the Titanic.
Right.
So, there's a lot of, this ultimately comes down to the question of who is deserving of the status. And I think we ultimately have to take personal responsibility for our own development as individuals spiritually, and development of our communities, and being able to identify others who are doing that work as well, and then learning how to work together with them, and ultimately becoming the kind of person who, when you're doing a job and serving because it's important, and then you're always looking for someone else who can do it better than you because you aren't perfect. That's what makes a great leader, is the servant leader. And the systems in place for government and politics has been compromised. And so we ultimately have to become our own government. We have to get involved in government and politics. And that involves doing what I'm doing now. I'm attempting to reach out to Lex Fridman. Maybe he'll get a notification. Maybe he'll join my Discord server. And then, when people come to me or come to you with feedback, are you able to handle that feedback in order to grow and improve? Are you able to do the error correction? And if you can't, it probably means you're in a position of power and influence that you are not capable of wielding. You are not capable of handling. You probably need to downsize or seek out help, professional help. And that's where your pride can pop up, or the sloth can pop up. Like, who are you to say that I need professional help? Well, in order to build trust and do government and do politics, we have to be willing to help, and we have to be willing to ask for help. And this is how we build trust, is through that non-slothful work that is, where we check our pride.
See, so there are stories, but the thing is, I have this sense, maybe it's a hope, that within most, if not every human heart, there's a kind of like flame of compassion and kindness and love that waits.
Yeah, we suffer. These sinful seeds, as they sprout and grow, we suffer, and those around us suffer. And there's this kind of reflection of suffering that happens. And so what, part of our condition is that we do want to have comfort. So the same thing that causes us not to grow, because we don't want to go through that uncomfortable work required in learning and growing, it's also the same thing that is urging us to learn and grow. So it's interesting. But yeah, there is something inside of each of us, and then that right way of being, like if you imagine the 7 sins, those sinful seeds, there are like kind of these counterpart seeds as well, which is like patience, gentleness, kindness, humility, compassion. These yeah. So that's, we end up trying to cultivate the right garden with the right seeds, and take, we have to pull the weeds out of the garden constantly.
You have a bias in that you have studied some of the darker aspects of human nature and human history. So it is difficult from the trenches, from the muck, to see a possible sort of way out through love. But it's not obvious that that's not the case.
Yeah, history is the story of winners being selected, right? So yeah, it's rare for the righteous person who has cultivated the right garden within their minds. It's rare for them to acquire power. The dark side of the force is actually, it allows for the acquiring of power in a fast manner. Like, it is without patience and gentleness and kindness and compassion and humility, right? So, the right way of seeking power is to accept that you may never have power, and you do it slowly, and maybe it happens in 20 years, right? That's kind of what I tell myself, is maybe I'll have power in 20 years. Maybe my children will have power, or the people who are part of my family and community will have power, or their children will have power, and they will have, learned to appreciate this kind of wisdom, and then the conditions will be right for the right people to be into the positions where they can be of most service, for the well-being of the world. So, but yeah, all of this suffering is an opportunity for growth. That's true for the individual, and it's true for the society at large, at every level.
Well, it's not just fine. It's the only way if you want to build a better future. So optimism is a prerequisite for engineering a better future. So so a historian has to see clearly into the past.
Right.
An engineer has to imagine a future that's different from the past, that's better than the past. Because without that, they're not going to be able to build a better future. So there's a kind of saying, like, you have to consider the facts. Well, at every single moment in history, if you allow yourself to be too grounded by the facts of the past, you're not going to create the future. So that's kind of the tension that we're living with. To have a chance, we have to imagine that the better future is possible.
So this is true, but it requires more. Like, you can imagine the future, like I've done, imagine peace on earth where everyone has food, water, and shelter, and there is no war, and there is no violence. And you can even take that and say, well, I don't know if we can be in that situation. Well, maybe we can just have a future where everyone has access to food, water, and shelter. Now that seems more possible than there being no violence. So now you have a vision. Well, the question is, how do you get there? And I could talk forever about how to do it, and that's what I do in these videos, is I talk about how you get there. And I'm an engineer, and I see that most people aren't imagining the future and the steps needed to get there, right? What people will do is they will take the slothful way out, and they will give their agency to someone else, like the government. So when you go and you cast a vote, and you vote in the ballot booth, for most people, if not all people, it is a giving of agency to someone else. And that's rooted in sloth, or laziness. And the ignorance of your potential ability to serve in the right position of power and influence in order to help the most people possible. And that's where meaning comes from. That's where your sense of meaning comes from, is becoming the person who is trying to serve in the best way possible at your point in space-time. So I hope I responded appropriately. Now, he did mention being able to see clearly in history. This doesn't happen. People may believe that Stalin's wife committed suicide. Well, I don't need to believe that. Like, he could have killed her. She may have committed suicide. Maybe an opponent of his killed her, and it was so it's, there's these potentials, and we, at this moment in time, we really don't know. Maybe there will be. I think there might become an opportunity for us in the future to have the technology to be able to see into space-time and actually know these things better. But, and we are developing that technology to some degree. I'm willing to talk about that. Like, the technology does exist for us to be able to see into the past. When you watch this video, you are looking into the past. So that's a hint.
What in this, if we think about, if it's okay, can we loosely use the term genocide here? Just let's not play games with terminology.
Right.
Just bad crimes against humanity.
Right.
Of particular interest are the ones that are going on today still, because it raises the question to us: what do people outside of this, what role do they have to play? So what role does the United States, or what role do I, as a human being who has food today, who has shelter, who has a comfortable life, what role do I have when I think about North Korea, when I think about Syria, when I think about maybe the Uyghur population in China?
So, like, there's an assumption here that the crimes against humanity aren't happening within the United States. And so there's this thing called the war on drugs. And so what happens is people will outsource their morality. They will distribute their thinking and their cognition to lawyers about what is moral. And the thing is our country, like, everyone is doing the evil, the immorality, because of those sinful seeds, and because of, like, peer pressure and our tendency to sin, to have sloth, to be lazy, to have wrath, and to have pride, these kinds of things, to be greedy and gluttonous. And so what can we do is we have to cultivate the garden within our minds, take personal responsibility for the well-being of the earth, of everyone on the planet. And the mistake that is being made here is the idea that somehow the United States is better than just name any group, right? Because as soon as I name a group, it's going to trigger the pride. And that's, a lot of people have a pride. They have a view that they aren't willing to be skeptical about and to make better with more nuance. So ultimately what we have to do is we have to become personally responsible for government, the government of ourselves and the governments of our communities. And through cooperation, we end up doing this error correction, which isn't happening. The error correction is not happening in the United States government. It's not happening because I believe these systems are captured. They're controlled, and that's because every individual is personally responsible, and they aren't putting in the work and the energy necessary to change the world. So that's what we can do. Get to work.
So
yes.
The interesting thing about China, and this is a difficult topic, but there's so many financial interests that not many voices with power and with money speak out against China, because it's a very interesting effect, because it costs a lot for an individual to speak up, because you're going to suffer. I mean, China just cuts off the market. Like, if you have a product, if you have a company, and you say something negative, China just says, okay, well, then they knock you out of the market. And so any person that speaks up, they get shut down immediately. Financially, it's a huge cost, sometimes millions or billions of dollars.
Right.
And so what happens is everybody of consequence, sort of financially, everybody with a giant platform is extremely hesitant to speak out. It's a different kind of hesitation that's financial in nature.
So he's pointing the finger at China, and I'm thinking, well, what are you doing, right? So there are things that he can't say because of, the people in positions of power, and because of his interest and his own personal wealth. And it's not just China. There ultimately has to be a willingness to, sacrifice your position of wealth and power and comfort. I think Jesus said something like, you have to the rich man who was righteous, it's like, well, you have to be willing to give it all away and follow me. And people just, there is a kind of greed and gluttony there that's within us, and there and if you have that, you might use the word courage, the courage to put all of that, all the things that you've acquired, that material wealth, to put that at risk. Good things can happen, but it's, people don't like to sacrifice. People don't like to make sacrifices that will lead to like their own discomfort. And I would say, like, there are things that Lex will not do because of that. So like, and it doesn't even have to be, YouTube being the one who will take control. It's also his audience. So, if you start saying the things that will upset the audience will go away, and then there's less attention, and then that attention has value, and you end up having less profit, less money. So there are a lot of forces at play in which determine why people aren't doing and saying the things that need to be done. And it's all, he had said he had mentioned bias earlier. There is a bias that's even subconscious, and Lex doesn't even realize it's happening to him. He is appealing to an audience that him and everyone in the audience, including myself, have this tendency toward sin. And if you start pointing at the things where the sin, has grown and is growing, it's going to be uncomfortable for the audience, and they're going to be tempted to click away.
But the interesting thing is, it's not just, I know a lot of people from China, and first of all, amazing human beings, and a lot of brilliant people in China. They also don't want to speak out, and not because they're sort of quote unquote like silenced, but more because they're going to also lose financially.
Yeah, just like you, and Joe Rogan, and Jordan Peterson, and everyone who has status and popularity. Are they willing to just toss it away to get rid of it? There is a force, there's a peer pressure that is happening subconsciously, and I don't think that people have learned how to handle so much popularity, or where they are trying to serve such a large amount of people. And this happens in government as well. It's a similar problem. And my claim is that, you know, these people need professional help. And, you know, what's funny is Lex is kind of into engineering and software, and, you know, if he were to able to actually do what he says should be done, like, you know, have the vision for the future where everyone, of the good, which I would say is everyone has food, water, and shelter, he would connect that back to personal responsibility, and then he would connect that back to the fact that we are, you know, at the very beginning, we have this, you know, the mental state of Stalin is the mental state of every human being to a degree. And so we have to do that work. And then we can do that work better if we have a team and we cooperate. And so then we can try to learn how to use the information technology to build our team and grow our team so that we can handle the size of the team. We don't know how to scale this thing. We haven't learned how to handle scale. We just haven't learned how to do that. And I do believe technology can help. And I include, you know, processes, protocols, and procedures when I say technology.
Question is, so like you said, technology is neutral. I agree with this. Technology is a toolkit, is a tool set that enables humans to have wider reach and more power. The printing press. The rare reason I can read your books is, I would argue, so first of all, the printing press, and then the internet. Wikipedia, I think, has immeasurable effect on humanity. Technology is a double-edged sword. It allows bad people to do bad things and good people to do good things. Exactly. It ultimately boils down to
the people.
What the people, and whether you believe the capacity for good outweighs the capacity of bad. And so you said that I'm naive. It is true. I'm naively optimistic.
So Lex isn't willing to put in the work, and neither is Norman. So it's not. So in a way, there is a naivety, right? You have to be willing to put in the work. I'm reminded of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. saying we have guided missiles and misguided men. And so ultimately it comes back to this spiritual battle internally and externally, where we have to maintain our garden within our minds. That's essential, so that we already have the technology to be able to provide food, water, and shelter to everyone on the planet. We can have better technology still, but without human beings becoming personally responsible for their own righteousness and working with other people who are doing the same, then we will never be able to solve this problem of providing food, water, and shelter for the entire planet.
There's a lot of people that argue that nuclear weapons is the reason we haven't had a World War III. So nuclear weapons, the mutually assured destruction, leads to a kind of, like, we've reached a certain level of destructiveness with our weapons where we were able to catch ourselves, not to create, like you said, hit really hard. This is...
So, like, there's these words like genocide and crimes against humanity and war. And, like, the mistake, like, with his thinking on China and these other countries who do crimes against humanity, is he doesn't realize that our own country does the immoral. And when he talks about the people in China who aren't speaking out, he makes the mistake of not realizing that he is not speaking out either, because of those even subconscious forces, the biases. And so when he says we haven't had World War III, it's like we have had wars. Like, just because they don't call it a world war doesn't mean that we don't have wars. The wars have been nonstop. there hasn't been a time with peace ever. And yeah, to imagine that like, this is like, I'm trying to put myself in Lex's head. He imagines I'm not doing the thing the Chinese people are doing, and you know, our country isn't doing the thing that the North Koreans are doing, and our time doesn't have the war that time had. You know, it creates a view where there is a less of a willingness to improve and grow and to become a better person, to transform. That's just our views and our beliefs and the definitions of these words that we like to use and we think that are true, which is what belief is. They will limit our potential. They have risks in shaping how we act in the world. So he's not being very careful.
What advice would you give to those young people today, maybe in high school, in college, at Stanford, maybe to your grandchildren, about how to have a career they can be proud of, have a life they can be proud of?
Well, one thing my father told me is to, no matter what you do, try your best. And what that means is that and so he didn't tell me what that means, but the way I understand it is you have to have goals. And obviously it's nice if they're good goals where you're not creating suffering and maybe you're helping. That's the ideal goal. So my dad used to say, I could be a trash man. And he would, as long as I tried to be the best trash man I could be, he would be proud. And so what that means is, you know, I can have a goal of making sure there's no trash anywhere in the world, like not in the oceans, not on the ocean floor, not anywhere. And then with a goal, like I can take being a trash man to its ultimate extreme of trying to be the best trash man possible, and then it will be good for the world, and it will be hard, and I'll make mistakes, and I will have to learn and grow. And so you have to ultimately have goals, and you have to try your best. And what that means is you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to learn. And through that process of essentially changing your mind and your beliefs and learning and trying to be productive towards your goal, you will become a better human being. Because what happens is those sinful seeds in your mind, you will eventually notice that they restrict your ability to accomplish the ultimate goals, like the most ideal form of whatever you are trying to be. Those sinful seeds are preventing that from happening, and then these corresponding things like that, you know, I like to call the fruit of the Holy Spirit would be patience, gentleness, kindness, humility. You know, these kinds of things are what's going to, and then I would say I will add cooperation. These kinds of things are what will be necessary in order to, you know, accomplish the goal, right? So it's not like I want to remove all the trash in the entire world as the ideal trash man. I want to make it so that trash does not collect anywhere for all space-time, right? That would be like the ultimate. So yeah, probably even need to learn how to formulate the goal better, so that when you accomplish a goal, you can reformulate it into an even better goal. There's always work that can be done.
I tend to think that even if you're not working in human rights, there's a certain way in which if you live with integrity, I believe that all of us, or many of us, have a bunch of moments in our lives when we're posed with a decision. It's a quiet one. Maybe it'll never be written about or talked about, where you get to choose whether there's a choice that is difficult to make. It might require sacrifice, but it's the choice that the best version of that person would make. That's the best way I can sort of say how to act with integrity. It's the very...
So not only that, like, you're fortunate if you actually are presented with a choice, and and it's a difficult choice, because what's happening is at every single moment, we have an infinite amount of choices, right? There's a choice that Lex Fridman is making which will probably lead to him ignoring me, right? Which, in my mind, with my pride, I think, you know, it would be good for him to pay attention to me because I am the kind of professional help that could be of service to popular people. But so that, and you don't know if, and he doesn't know if that's true. It may be true and it may not be true, but he's definitely, I would say he's probably not going to be making the choice that leads to him doing good work with me. And so he, you know, you could end up, you know, after this life is over, you could end up being with an omniscient force that's connected to all of every event that ever happened, and you know, you could end up with some knowledge at that point that says, oh, well, I should have been trying to form a team, and the best team possible, and because cooperation and teamwork and community is necessary. And not only that, but there are these people who were trying to be part of my team, who I was ignoring, and I didn't even realize they were trying, right? This is the kind of stuff that's happening, is people don't even know what they don't know. We don't know what we don't know. I do have hope for an artificial intelligence, information technology that allows for this human resource problem to be solved better. But it is a problem that people don't even realize we have. That the problem is that there are people who are qualified to be in positions of power and influence, and they're more qualified than anyone else on the planet at that point in space-time. And that organization of people can perform the most good possible on Earth. And over time, that organization of people will change as people get sick and get old, and other people learn and grow, and it just changes over time, and it's hard to manage this organization. And I have hope that technology can help us do that, but first we have to understand that this is a problem that we have, that we don't know how to organize effectively as human beings. Then we can begin to, you know, imagine answers to that problem. And ultimately, Lex would know this if he was serious about, you know, trying to envision and engineer the ideal future. But he's, you know, he's not serious about it. And I say that, and you know, he's on a path. Maybe he'll realize it. I think even the audience, like, everyone's on a path, and eventually, you know, people will realize this. These kinds of things, I believe these things will happen, and I'm not upset that people haven't realized it yet, because, you know, I like to believe that people are on good paths, and they just have to take those steps and continue, and then they will end up, you know, seeing the problem I see, and imagining solutions like I've imagined, and solutions I haven't imagined. So, you know, I have hope. I just, I've taken personal responsibility.
Well, let me ask you about love. What role does love play in this whole thing, in the human condition? In all the study of genocide, it does seem that hardship in moments brings out the best in human nature, and the best. So, love, yeah, that patience, gentleness, kindness, compassion, cooperation. It's the Holy Spirit. You know, God is love. God is justice. You know, I think it's important, and it's our personal responsibility to try to embody the ideal spirit at every moment, and that includes, you know, working on tending to our garden. And, you know, when we're suffering, like, one response I've noticed in myself even recently is, and it will happen again, is that there will be wrath emerge because of
people doing it wrong. And then I can recognize that wrath is dangerous, and I can gently transform it into questions like, well, what can I do different? Some of it might be that I can be patient, gentle, kind with people who are behaving in the ways that would make me angry. And then I can also be, I can be less slothful in trying to do the work necessary in order to make the changes such that the experience that made me wrathful will be less likely to happen going into the future. So, and that includes what I'm doing now, right? Just a little bit of outreach, a little bit of participation and cooperation, network building.
And
I'm not so sure. It's obvious to me that it's harder. There's suffering, but the numbers, we've been talking about deaths, been talking about suffering, but the numbers we're not quantifying. The history that you haven't perhaps been looking at is all the times that people have fallen in love deeply with friends, with romantic love, the positive emotion that people have felt. And I'm not so sure that amidst the suffering, those moments of beauty and love can't be discovered. And if we look at the numbers, I'm not so sure the story is obvious.
So I don't think Lex is completely right. Like, I do think there is some naivety here in that, like, this view is dangerous because it can lead to slothfulness, right? It's the same kind of view that people can have when they say, well, Jesus will come back and bring peace on earth, or Mashiach, will come and bring peace on earth. And the danger is that you are outsourcing the responsibility. And so in this way, he's kind of outsourcing the responsibility to the metaphysical. That is a danger, and I definitely do it to a degree as well. In that I'll see problems and answers, and then I'll know that someone is going to actually do the creation in order to solve the problem. But it actually happens. I see it happen. Even this Ryan Lewis, who created thislittlecorner.com, this-little-corner.com, he created the thing that I had imagined needed to be created. And I've got proof on my Discord server that I had imagined it, and then it had happened. These kinds of things happen. So like the technology that ends up solving the problem, these creative people will end up doing it. And so my focus is just trying to be of service and offer help and attempt to cooperate, which is what I did to Ryan. I invited him to my Discord server and I offered to help, and I probably should have a conversation with him so we just are more clear about my willingness to help him. I don't know if we're on the same page at the moment. But yeah, be careful about outsourcing responsibility to other people. And then for someone like Ryan, be careful about hoarding the responsibility and saying, I am the one who's completely responsible for this. Be careful about that as well, because big problems require cooperation. There's some problems that no individual can actually solve by themselves. Oh, and there we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll leave you with a little bit more music.
Versus good. Versus good. Versus good. Wow. This is actually really profound. This is the situation we find ourselves in. There are not two sides in which one is good and one is evil. There are two sides in which one feels that it is good and it believes, incorrectly, that the other one is evil. But both sides are pretty sure that their version of the world is the good one. Wow. The world is, and always has been, a battle of good versus good. Versus good.